Okay, joining us now, California Congressman Khanna. Great to have you in studio with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's start here. A roundup of how things have been going for President Trump. Senator Scott mentioned the big, beautiful bill. We'll talk about that. That's been passed, but this as well. His order to bomb Iran set back that nation's nuclear program without triggering a broader conflict. He flew to Europe, got NATO members to pony up more money for their own defense. The economy showed resilience in the face of predictions that his tariffs would send it spiraling. The stock market is hitting record highs. Illegal border crossings plummeted last month to the lowest numbers seen in decades. That's not a White House press release. That's coming from the New York Times.
Well, look, I think there are two things that are going to matter. One, on Iran, is can he actually get a deal? Even Vice President Vance has said that they have nuclear fuel enriched there for 10 nuclear bombs. So the question is, can he get a deal? I hope he does. And if he does, I would give him credit. On this, the economy, the big issue is the bill, and we're going to get into that. But I just don't think that taking away the health care with the Medicaid cuts and food assistance to give the tax breaks for the very wealthy is going to be good for working and middle class Americans.
Okay, before we get there into the details of that, let's talk about the economy specifically. Wages are up, inflation has slowed, prices are stabilizing on just about everything. Unemployment is down. The jobs report beat expectations. 2 previous months were revised upward on jobs. The AP quotes Carl Weinberg, chief economist at High Frequency Economics, saying there's nothing to complain about here. You cannot find any evidence of a nascent recession in these figures. Consumer confidence, we know, was up for June, too, for Republicans, Democrats, and independents. People feel like things are improving.
Well, that's not what people are telling me at home or around the country. I mean, people still are very anxious with costs. They think that rents are too high, housing costs are too high, food prices are too high. They're anxious about having good paying jobs. And the private sector jobs were not growing. I mean, a lot of that was jobs in the state and local government, and a lot of it was in healthcare, where we're now going to have Medicaid cuts. So I think people are anxious about the economy. I'm not going to say, and I hope we don't go into a recession, but the reality is people aren't getting high enough wages for the costs.
Okay, so here is what the Council of Economic Advisors, they're aligned with the president, of course. So here's what they predicted if the bill had not passed. They said economic growth would have slowed. It would have reduced the GDP by 4%. It would have cost 6.1 million full-time equivalent jobs, and federal revenues would have been reduced by roughly 6%. So acknowledgement that any of those risk predictions could have come true.
Well, the reality is this adds $3.8 trillion to the national debt. A lot of the tax breaks are for the wealthiest Americans. We know from 2017, when they tried these tax cuts for wealthy Americans, that people put that money in stock buybacks. They did not increase business investment. His same advisors made all these statements that it was going to have economic growth. It didn't do that. If you really wanted economic growth, you would be focused on working families, middle-class families. Instead, they've given 60% of the tax breaks to the richest Americans, and they're hurting working-class Americans, and they're making them poorer, and that's the Congressional Budget Office.
Well, by IRS data, though, the 2017 cuts, which were just extended, they did benefit every bracket of taxpayer, and by their assessment, it was middle and lower income taxpayers who actually benefited more as a percentage of their income.
Sure, that's an excellent point of why this bill is so much worse. In 2017, there was disproportionate benefits for the wealthy, but you're right, everyone got some break. Now, 40% of Americans, if you're working class or middle class, you're actually going to be worse off because you're going to lose health care, you're going to lose food assistance, and the small tax cut isn't going to make up for that. So if you're in the top 50% of Americans, fine. But if you're in the middle class and working class, this bill is actually going to make you worse off. And that's why it's such a cruel policy. By the way, it's a tax increase on everyone's health care. They're taking away the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Premiums in this country for those on the exchange are going to go up 75 to 100%.
We're going to talk with the speaker about all of that coming up. But I want to get to this point because I talked with the Treasury Secretary a little bit about this, about his idea that there's enforcement against illegal immigration built into this bill that he thinks is going to help Americans economically. His piece over at the FoxNews.com op-ed that he wrote, he says the influx of millions of illegal aliens put an unsustainable strain on health care, housing, education, and welfare. It also supported a black market in labor that artificially suppressed working class wages for decades. He says the bill works to ensure that illegal immigrants are not taking advantage of the safety net created for Americans. Our most recent polling on this shows a strong majority of Americans favor deporting those who are here illegally. So what about the economic side of this argument that the Treasury Secretary makes?
I think what most Americans want is to deport people who are here who are criminals or committing violent acts. They don't want mass deportation of people who are paying taxes and working hard. And even President Trump realized that when he said, you know, folks are telling him, folks in the restaurants and folks in the hospitality industry, that they don't want people who are working hard deported. So I think the Secretary of Treasury has a different opinion than Donald Trump, who was in the hospitality industry, who's saying if you're paying taxes, you're working hard, then you're helping the economy. And the problem is that a lot of the mass deportation of that is actually hurting economic growth.
I want to ask you before you go about this issue of Zohran Mamdani, who is the Democrat nominee for mayor in New York City. You expressed some frustration that people were talking more about that than they were about the big, beautiful bill over the last few days. But the fact is, he's expressed all kinds of past and current sentiments that people have real questions about. Is he in the mainstream of your party when he talks about things like the government confiscating means of production, his refusal to condemn the statement, globalize the intifada, threats to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, getting rid of private insurance, prisons? You've heard all these allegations, and most of them out of his own mouth. Are those issues that your party welcomes and supports?
The reason Zohran Mamdani won is he had a laser focus on affordability. He talked about rents, he talked about high grocery prices, he had plans for how he were going to bring down costs of living in New York. Now, of course, I condemn globalized intifada. I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel. He's the leader of Israel. I disagree with him, but of course I met with him, and I believe Israel has the right to exist as a secure Jewish democratic state. But people who are attacking Mamdani are missing why he won. He was talking about pocketbook issues. He mobilized a lot of people, and that's ultimately the lesson for the Democratic Party. Focus on the economy, focus on affordability, focus on good jobs, focus on health care.
But doesn't disqualify him to hold some of these other positions along with those?
Well, the people voted for him. You can agree with certain things, which I do, on his economy, disagree with a statement on globalize the intifada. And I think the Democratic Party is very, very capable of having a strong economic message and being in the mainstream. And this tax bill, I think, is going to be the key issue, because it's really ripping away health care for tax breaks for billionaires.
Okay, we will see what the speaker has to say about that. I'm sure he'll have a response. Congressman, good to have you in.
Thank you.